Hey everyone, and welcome back to Ideanthro. Now today, we're bringing you a simulcast episode, and a simulcast on another initiative of mine called Jack Mullally Discussions. So before we get into it, Ideanthro audience, meet Jack Mullally Discussions audience, Jack Mullally Discussions audience, meet Ideanthro audience. Now, if you're not familiar with what both of these initiatives are, let me give you a little introduction. So on Ideanthro, our goal is to share knowledge, share ideas around the concept or the topic of water-sensitive urban design, stormwater management, waterway health, to try and allow people to do the best possible work that they can in these fields. Now, Jack Mullally Discussions predated that. It came first. And Jack Mullally Discussions came out of a fascination of mine where I began to notice that the techniques, the principles, the processes that led to good outcomes in one aspect of life also led to good outcomes in others. And so I was finding this when I was combining my professional work compared to, say, my life as a bike rider, and so on. All sorts of different connections where one thing worked in one aspect of life, then worked in others. So jackmullally.com came, jackmullally.com was the website I was running that through, but Jack Mullally Discussions, sorry while I switch hands here, Jack Mullally Discussions came about as a way for me to explore those cross connections, explore what was going on there, where we were learning from one aspect of our life and applying it to others. Now, of course, Ideanthro has ended up taking over, and that's really where I've been focusing recently. And on Ideanthro, recently, you'll notice that we've interviewed a few interesting people. So we spoke to Alan Hoban recently. Now, Alan is a very well-respected engineer and designer in Brisbane, Australia, working in the water-sensitive urban design space. And we talked to him about his process that he goes to when he goes out to the site for the first time. He's doing a job for a client and he needs to investigate this site because he's never been there before. He needs to understand what's going on. So we spoke to him and we tried to understand his process of understanding the site. We've also recently spoken to Claire Bennett. Now, Claire is also an engineer working in the stormwater management and infrastructure fields, but she's also a startup founder. And we talked to her about how she tries to help people in the teams that she's working in to be the best that they can be, because that ends up getting the best outcome for the team. And so you can see here where we're starting to creep, even though it's in the field of water-sensitive urban design, those interviews, we're starting to creep a little bit towards where Jack Mullally Discussions was, about trying to learn from one aspect of life and apply it to others. Well, in this episode, we have another interview for you, and it's really getting closer and closer to that Jack Mullally Discussions thing, so we've decided to combine the two. The person who I'm speaking with today is Ryan Leech. Now, Ryan Leech was something of an idol of mine when I was growing up riding bikes, because Ryan was a professional mountain biker and trials rider. And then later on in his life, more recently, he has transitioned into a space of being a mountain biking coach, but also a yoga coach, meditation coach, life coach. And he's had this transition here where he's taken things that he's learnt in one aspect of life and begun to apply them into others. So we sat down to have a chat. And of course, Ryan's talking a lot from his experiences in these particular fields, but I'm sitting there and really actively trying to relate that back to water-sensitive urban design, because I am sure that there are things that we can learn from Ryan's experiences as a bike rider, a yoga coach, and all these other many interesting things that he's got going on, and then apply into the water-sensitive urban design field. So we sat down, we had a great chat, and I really enjoyed it because we had the opportunity to go really quite deep on a number of topics. Ryan had the opportunity to sit there and really think about some of these questions and try and delve into them. And sometimes the answers, or sometimes the discussion from both of us, not just Ryan's answers, but also my questions, get a little bit abstract as we're trying to tease this apart. But I feel that there's heaps of value in it. I certainly enjoyed making it, and I hope that you're going to enjoy watching and listening to it. So, without further ado, why don't I get out of the way and let you get to this interview. So, please enjoy my chat with Ryan Leech.
Hey, Ryan, welcome along. How are you doing?
Yeah, pretty good, Jack. Yeah, good to see you.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for taking the time to have a chat this morning. So to get into this, and we got I suppose, a few different angles, a few different things we're going to discuss. But for anyone who's not familiar with who you are or what you do, when you know, when someone comes up to you, meet someone for the first time, they ask, you know, who you are, what you do. How do you answer that?
Well, pro mountain biker and coach. You know, if we're talking about you know, trying to label my career, that would probably be a good start to the conversation.
Okay.
But it's interesting because my career and lifestyle just blend in so many different ways. So
Yeah. Okay. And when you mention this lifestyle piece, what sorts of things does that bring in and blend in?
so just the fact that there's this sort of combination of the fact that I ride recreationally and I also get paid to ride. So it's always an interesting conversation to have with people. Often I might say, "Oh, I work in the cycling industry," if I don't want to trigger conversation. So yeah, or I say, "Oh yeah, I work in marketing and promotion," or you know, I'm a coach, that kind of thing.
Yeah, sure. And then, so how did you first get into the mountain biking space? Because you've appeared in quite a few videos for trials riding and that sort of thing. How did you first find bike riding?
Yeah, so in terms of finding bike riding or finding mountain biking from trials, sort of thing.
Oh, either or. You take that way. You.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I started just riding my bike in the forest across the street from where I live for fun, just splashing through puddles and goofing around with some buddies. And it was before I knew it was even a sport. And so then I discovered some mountain bike magazines and I thought, oh, cool, you know, that's what I'm doing. And so I kept at it and started racing downhill and cross country and got full on into mountain biking. And then, you know, discovered trials riding as one of the disciplines of the sport and got right into that and pretty much gave up the trail riding while I focused on developing my trial skills. And that pretty much launched my career as a trials rider. That's really how I became known, through my trials riding skills, through performing shows and doing videos, that kind of thing. And then I started to get more into mountain biking again. It's kind of a beautiful transition from taking your trials riding skills into the trails. And so that's been a huge blast for me over the last bunch of years.
Yeah, cool. So what was it about trials riding? For anyone who's watching who I suppose isn't familiar with trials is a discipline that is really all about riding your bike over the hardest obstacles you can. It's not a fast sport, although there can be speed involved with it, but it's about picking the most technically challenging obstacles and navigating your bike over that, whether that's rocks or logs or concrete pipes or, you know, walls out in the urban environment, metal chains in your case. Yeah, what was it about trials that initially hooked you?
Just being able to practice and see results was a really satisfying process for me. Okay. Versus like training for cross country, it was, you know, going out on these long rides and not really noticing huge improvements in fitness over time, you know. So I liked that satisfaction, that instant gratification of learning new skills. And so
yeah. And what is it that you mentioned more recently you've come back around to mountain biking? What is it that shaped that transition back into that space?
Partly it's just not as hard on my body, you know. That would be one factor. Two, I just love getting out in the forest. I mean, really, that's something that is, you know, just going out for a ride with some friends and exploring the mountains and the forests and the trails. You know, it's really a full experience. Like, there's so many beautiful things involved: friendship, fresh air, great exercise, you know, challenges on the trail that you can play around with and, you know, add some trials skills too. So it's really got, it's just so much richness in mountain biking for me, you know. Yeah. So I just, yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so what I'd like to delve into, so what interests me. So you've got this background in riding, which, you know, started as mountain biking, transitioned through a long period of trials and a very successful period of trials, and then you know, you're coming back around, still riding trials, but doing more mountain biking as well. But you've got this other component to what it is that you do in this coaching space, where you've got some like yoga teaching going on, some interest in meditation and that sort of thing. And I'm particularly interested to try and explore the connection between the two, between that, you know, the original trials riding and mountain biking part of your life, and then this part of your life, because it parallels to some respect with things that I've been experiencing recently. Again, myself having come through, you know, trials riding for many years, but also with work in a professional sense, and then more recently dabbling into things like meditation and that sort of thing, and noticing there's lots of crossover between like what works and what helps breed, you know, good outcomes in one area. I am now beginning to find and learn breeds good outcomes in other areas, and I'm very, very curious about that. So I'm wondering if we can kind of delve, I mean, I suppose maybe touch off firstly, sorry, long intro to this question.
No, it's great.
But touch off, I suppose, briefly about what it is you do in that you know, yoga coaching sort of space, and then where the cross connections are.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's really it's hard, you know, riding is such a full part of my life and it affects everything. Yoga is a very strong component to my life that I've been practicing for a dozen years now, and so that interrelates and sort of gets in every nook and cranny of my life. And meditation, about 8 years I've been practicing meditation, and again, that's just it just meshes into everything that I do. So, you know, these practices that we engage with, whether it's riding bikes, practicing yoga, practicing meditation, you know, these become just part of our makeup. It's just, you know, you do these things so often, it's impossible for them not to inform how you see the world. So that's my experience. I see the world in a different way just because I've invested so much time in these different things, and sort of the combination of those three things, I think, makes it provides a unique way of seeing things, and for me, it's provided this. I don't know. I guess it's just provided a nice bridge from one purpose in my life, which was, you know, become really good at riding trials and make some money by doing it, and it's bridged to another purpose of sharing with others some of the ways that I've been able to maintain a healthy body from riding so hard all these years, and that's bridged into another purpose, which is a little more deep, a little more intimate in this coaching realm, where I do life coaching, and that then, you know, again links now back to the yoga and biking, where I can apply some of these teachings for other riders and athletes. And so meaning and purpose is, you know, I would say just a huge part of it, because sorry, a long answer to your long question. It's pretty cool how just the practicing, so the yoga and meditation practice, it just is the purpose and just the nature of those practices has forced me to look at myself in different ways. And because of that, I've had to find new purpose and new meaning. So it's kind of like, okay, if you stop and listen, then you can't unhear what you hear. Does that make any sense? I should stop talking so you can reflect back.
No, it's really good, and I like the I like the long answers because it's an like the long question, the long answer, because I think it's an opportunity then to get into some depth in things rather than just like, you know, the little soundbite sort of grab. So I pick up from what you were saying, but also the nature of how you were describing that. It resonated with me how like you had to think very deeply and go quite deep in trying to give that answer, because it's like, and I might be projecting my own thoughts here, but I've experienced similar things while trying to describe to people why, like where I can see the cross connections between my time spent riding and then my time spent in stormwater management and then like dabbling into this meditation space. And it seems like intuitively, for me at least, I know that there are cross connections, and I know that what's, you know, helping me to have some success in one is also helping in others. But it's very hard to articulate it. It's like there's a feeling there, but when you actually come to sit down and someone asks you about it, it's like, oh, what is it? I wonder, is that, you know, so I saw you like having to really think through the answer there, and was I projecting my own thoughts onto you when I saw that, or is that something that you can relate to?
Yeah, no, thanks for pointing that out. You know, it's a nice way to be in a conversation. I love that, where you can hear the words of the answer, but also you can tune into to the process of how that answer came to be. You can kind of see that process happening. And so, you know, yeah, it's often a struggle to find words to articulate what we feel and what we experience. And so, you know, I feel a big part of my job is trying to do that, trying to translate my experience into words, you know. So in writing, and you know, it's a lot easier for me to share, to pass along sort of some of the progressions and things I've learned in trials riding can be picked up by other riders, because it's right there in front of you. You can see it. You can study the movement patterns. Whereas the inner realm, the inner space, the subjective realm, even the intersubjective kind of space, is something that words need to be found to describe. You know, you need to ask someone, you need to be engaged in some sort of conversation, read a book to get in the head of another person. And so a challenge for me is just that, because riding bikes is so much more than pulling off a move or not pulling off a move. There's the whole inner experience of it. And for me, you know, I'm enjoying riding these days in my life more than I ever have. And I definitely, I'm not riding nearly as at a high level as I once did as a trials rider, but the experience of ride, I've got more access to depth. There's more, it seems like there's more I can take in. There's more that can kind of flow through my being when I'm out on the trail. You know, it's like tasting food. You start to read some tasting notes, and then you can start to use that to go deeper into how you taste food. And so it just gets richer and richer. But it takes some effort. It takes some practice. You've got to do this study. You've got to study all the, you know, the different wines to understand the difference in the tastes, or the different beers. Microbreweries are just exploding here in BC where I am, and so it's so cool to try all these different tastes. And so I guess, you know, that's it's just, it's incredible, just the amount. It takes practice, and you know, to develop that extra layer of sort of richness. You know, it takes some intentional practice, and so I think that's what the meditation's for. I think that's what the yoga is for, to get a little more intimate with how your body feels when you're moving. So So yeah, again, I'll stop there. So I hope, yeah, how'd that answer resonate for you,
Yeah,
Jack?
absolutely. And it's interesting. So there's heaps of good stuff in there, and so it's a bit challenging of where to pick off, where to go next. But something
Yeah.
relatively early in that answer that resonated with me was you mentioned how, with trials riding, it's a case of, oh, look, it's relatively easy to impart those skills to people because there's something tangible that is like, I am doing this with my body to get this outcome, and therefore I can show you what I'm doing, and you can, with practice, be able to implement that in there. But there's also then this inner realm that's more challenging, and that resonated with me in the water sensitive urban design space that I work. And just for I know we spoke briefly on email about this, but just for your benefit, so water sensitive urban design is this concept of how we manage water in our urban areas to get the best outcomes from those urban areas, to make them as nice as possible, to make them as green and lush as possible, but also to make sure that we're not damaging the environment with stormwater and that sort of thing. But anyway, in that sort of, we are, I've in the past been involved with running, say, training for people of how to design different types of, stormwater management measures as part of this. And I've become really aware recently that, like, there's two levels to what we can teach people in that sort of space. There's this first level, which is, there might be a particular form of stormwater treatment, and we can teach, facts about it. So it should be, should have these parameters. It should be designed like that. It should be that deep, and, have that sort of materials in it, and so on and so forth, which are relatively easy to convey, similar to, a track stand on the bike, right? Well, you want to have your feet level, 1 foot forward, turn the handlebars away from the front foot, that sort of thing. But then there's the second level to it, which is in water sensitive urban design, there's like an art to how you put this stuff together that like the best practitioners have it and tend to get good outcomes more often, but actually articulating what that is. So what exactly they are doing. And so, while I'm chatting with you today around this sort of space, I've been sitting down recently and talking to practitioners in this field and trying to nut out what actually is at the core of getting these good outcomes. And I think some of it is some of it's technical, but some of it's also like a mindset and like this element of wanting to push to get the best outcomes, wanting to challenge yourself. And I think that resonates a little bit with this kind of bike riding space and trials.
Right.
There's an element of trials where it's so technical, where there's this long bit of practice of constantly wanting to get better and better and better. You can go out and ride your bike and have heaps of fun as a mountain biker, and improve, but also with trials there's this dedicated practice, and I can see parallels between the two, but I just can't quite put my finger on what's going on there. Did any of that resonate with you?
Sure. Well, it seems like the big question is what propels a person to practice in the first place? What propels a person to spend the time to come up with perhaps the design for the water conservation sort of infrastructure, maybe the sort of or to go out and go ride instead of not ride. So what is I guess a question is so what is that sort of secret sauce is kind of what you were kind of getting curious about, because there's the step-by-step process that will get this specific result. It's all based on measurables. It's all based on things that we can see and understand. So we can do that. We can replicate that. Anyone can replicate a certain formula, but what about adding your own sort of flavor, your own taste to it? What about sort of progressing in your own way from that? So it takes study and practice to get the basics understood and learned, and at which point you can begin to iterate, you can begin to progress, you can begin to add your own sort of flavor, based on a combination of all your life's experiences, all the things that are meaningful to you, that will be part of whatever newness this sort of offering is to the world. So seems a lot of careers, that are perhaps in your realm may be one or the two. They may be just going through the motions and producing the set patterns that are already in play in the world. And then there might be some people that are adding their own sort of creativity and sort of progression and uniqueness on top of that. So, so I'll just stop there. I mean, you could probably add the next thing on that.
Yeah, look, that certainly rings true. So this is again
the same question. I mean, it was kind of, I think it was a long answer to kind of reiterate what you were pointing at. I didn't give any thoughts as to what triggers that extra sort of creative.
I think you have almost by accident stumbled across one feature of this water sensitive urban design space, is that it is a relatively new field. So we definitely do have this element of, in stormwater management, we've done things in this particular way for many, many years. And then there's this new field emerging and people coming along and trying to change the status quo. And that does develop that two kind of parallel approaches, where there's people who are doing very much what we've always done. And that's fine, because there were good reasons why we did that, right? Like, we started doing stormwater management to stop flooding. That's an important thing to do. Then there's this other realm of how best we can use the water, how we can protect the environment and so forth, that's emerging. And there's a bit of a tension between the two, for sure. So, okay, where would I like to take this?
Well, just one thought that just to tag off that, sort of finish off that thought pattern, there is also the fact that whatever is new and being created, it takes effort. It takes a lot of sort of time and energy to do it the first time. And then after that's established, then it's easier the next time, until it's an established pattern, which just, is, just can be part of what is normal.
Yeah. That also rings true. That feels a little bit like, again, in this field. So we had this traditional stormwater management, we had this concept of water sensitive urban design appear and start to get implemented. And initially the concept was a very big dream, and we've had some components of that mainstream a lot quicker than others. And that kind of feels like it runs into that space of, oh, well, we've practiced some components of it more, and those have stuck relatively well. And then some of the other stuff that was there initially isn't quite sticking as well just yet, quite possibly because it just hasn't had the practice, but also because to get those, it took heaps of effort to get the first bits to stick. And then it requires another large jump of effort to get the next component to stick. And that's not a reason not to do it by any means. And great reason to do it, right? Because there's so much to be learned from the process of that intense study and intense practice. But I really think there's something in that, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's huge.
Okay, so coming back to, I suppose, your experiences and the writing, the yoga coaching, and that sort of thing. So you have people come to you for coaching, both in a bike riding sense and in more of a life coaching sort of space. What sorts of walks of life are people coming from? Or actually, more interesting, what sorts of things are people hoping to get out of that sort of space? Is it all just, you know, bike riders wanting to ride better, or is there other people, or what's the dynamics there?
Cool. Yeah, good question. And you know, I think I can just link it right back to the conversation we were just having, and that is just the established patterns become relatively sort of easy to continue in. And so that's life. I mean, as we age, we get into certain sort of patterns and rhythms, and there's a lot of momentum wrapped up in keeping things going as they are, keeping things the same. And as that sort of continues, it can be quite painful for a lot of people to stay in that same phase, that same cycle. So I often see people reach out to me to say, hey, you know, I'm recognizing I'm in this pattern. Hey, one of your chickens there.
Yeah. I might really get going and really make a lot of noise.
So when they're sort of really recognizing they're in this pattern, and it feels really painful to them because they don't know how to get out of it. They may have tried a few things and, you know, hit a wall or gotten stuck and fallen back into the regular monotonous pattern of life. Even if life is awesome, even if they've got nothing, you know, really to complain about, you know, from the surface, it can still be really painful because it's kind of the same thing. So whether it's a bike skill or a set of bike skills they can't seem to progress from, you know, maybe maybe that links to also their other parts of their lifestyle. So the chance to work collaboratively with someone is over a length of time can be I guess it's easier to work with someone to practice new things to get out of that cycle and phase than it is to do it by yourself a lot of times. So a coach doesn't necessarily tell you exactly what to do, but co-creatively together you can come up with a pretty solid plan and a great amount of sort of accountability between each other, such that new things can be established, new patterns can be set such that they're starting to have their own momentum into the next phase. So working with a rider to get a skill to a certain point where they've got it and they can then perpetuate it and iterate on it out in the trail on their own. Same with, you know, different life challenges they might have, whether it's, you know, just trying to tap back into the creativity for work, or it might be some sort of relationship challenge, or it might be a habit they're trying to break. Whatever it is, you know, getting that new pattern started. What is the way in for them that's meaningful to get that new habit started, or that new sort of path blazed. And so that's, you know, that's what I love to do, work with people on. Yeah, and so
that's the your last comment there, that's what you love, is really interesting, because it sounds like you find it very, very fulfilling, which I've got to admit parallels with, again, some of my own experiences over the past, well, I mean, it's past few years in general, but also particularly recently, where I've, no, let's go with the past few years as I'm thinking through, in that taking the time to reach out and share, whether it's knowledge or experiences, or to, you know, sit and talk with people about what's going on, feels very fulfilling. So in my world, until very recently, I worked at an organization called Healthy Waterways, which effectively tried to help provide, you know, skills and knowledge in this water sensitive urban design space and training and that sort of thing. And in hindsight, looking back at the reason, you know, when I first joined Healthy Waterways 3.5 years ago, I was very, very excited to join. And it was that element. It was that element of being able to work with people through a challenge. And the challenge in this instance is, how do we implement water sensitive urban design? That was very exciting and very fulfilling for me. And I think that's in that similar sort of space. Like sometimes in the professional realm, we get caught up in this, oh, you know, it's my IP, don't want to share sort of thing. But so much more comes from when you sit down with people and talk openly and share ideas, because the cross connection of the two minds coming at stuff from slightly different angles generate way more than the sum of the parts. It's like the old saying, the product is greater than the sum of the parts, for sure.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. And you know, that's part of the process, I guess, of growing and learning. You know, is that collaboration, not being so. For me, it's been a matter of not being so protective of my ego, and sort of not being so protective of my sort of self-identity, and trying to maintain a certain image that I thought was supposed to be maintained. Once I broke through and sort of noticed and recognized when I was contributing to you know, trying to create this image that wasn't necessarily true through and through, that's when, you know, I was able to tune into the depth that can come from that collaborative process that you were speaking of, you know, to experience, oh yeah, you know, these two minds can come together and have, you know, trigger also, you know, way more beauty and truth and and ideas than just solo.
Yeah. So you mentioned that period for you of letting go and, you know, realizing that you didn't necessarily, maybe been projecting one outward appearance, but then that might not have been entirely true to you, and then becoming comfortable with being, of presenting, I suppose, outwardly who you are. I'd be curious to delve into that, and tell me if I'm completely barking up the wrong tree. But obviously, like, yeah, the trials writing world's a small place, and so I've been aware of you as a writer for many years. Like when I first got into trials, would have been watching some of your earlier videos. Like it was probably Evolve, I think.
Okay, yeah.
But anyway, but having but having seen, there definitely, even from the outside, appeared to be like a period of change for you, where it stopped being just pushing it as a trials writer, and then this other stuff kind of coming in and broadening out. But I also noticed, again, watching from afar, you cop a little bit of flack from that in some of these online kind of spaces, which aren't the friendliest in the world in the trials sense. I won't go and name this sort of stuff specifically, but people may be wondering, oh, you know, this person's changing. What does that mean for them? Were you aware of people's, as you were going through this, were you aware of people's perceptions of you changing, and how did you deal with that? Or do I need to be more, do I need to provide more context to that question?
No, I don't think so. You know, I think it's often, there's this set of, things were working for me as a pro writer, as someone who created videos and I pushed myself and put out videos that showcased, you know, the very latest, and people loved that. They enjoyed seeing that, and that was great. So that was working. It was making me money as well. So that was my career. And so that's sort of happening. But on another level, here I am like, man, this isn't fulfilling anymore. I'm sort of forcing myself to get on my bike to create the next best thing, and do that. I was doing that long enough, and again, it became painful for me to do that. Kind of like what I was speaking to before. So, it required me to, try some different things. And sometimes when you change directions and courses, well, always when you do, it's going to affect other people. There's no next new video, or this piece you put out, it wasn't entertaining. It didn't give me that sort of buzz and excitement that I have come to expect. And so there's often some disappointment. It's the same thing with a lot of the life coaching I do. When someone tries something new, there's resistance. There's people from the outside will challenge this change because it's not what they expect. It throws them off. It can make them uncomfortable. And so it requires sort of that brevity that you risk making a change, because for one, it might disappoint or upset some other people, and for two, what you change, it might not actually work. So there is a lot of risk to change paths. But if you don't, then you lose the chance to learn. You have to become more numb to the cycle, the monotony, the process of things that seem to be working on the surface. But I always go make the change, try something different. That's based on my own experience. Man, that's where the spice is. And so, but some things I've tried didn't work, or had some feedback on that said that's not the best thing, and so sometimes I adjust, sometimes I stick with it if it feels right and true. So does that sort of answer?
And that parallels really interestingly with this water sensitive urban design space. And while you were describing that at an individual level, I can see how that the same process, or I believe I can see how the same process is occurring on a like a discipline wide or a sector wide space with water sensitive urban design, in the sense of we've done things one way for so long, and it's challenging and confronting to try and change and do them a different way. So when you're when you're say coaching someone who's wanting to or about to go through some sort of change in that space, and there might be some resistance that's coming up, are there particular like techniques, or if for want of a better word, advice, or that sort of thing that how do you approach that? Is there stuff that people can take away and go, okay, that's something tangible and useful I could apply when there's a change, when there's a challenge, and how I deal with it?
Sure. Well, there's got to be a way in. That's the first thing. There's got to be a first step that is possible, that's foreseeable, that's it's risky, but it's not that risky. It's a step in the right direction, but it's not like full committalness, necessarily. So that's often seems to be what it takes. And so for me, I get creative with trying to come up with some sort of progressive practice sort of strategy that okay, let's try this first, and then let's try this. Let's build up these skills gradually, and adjust as we get real feedback from the world. Try this thing, recognize what worked, what didn't, adjust, and then take the next step.
Okay. So it's building up. Yeah.
For the most part, I would say that seems to be, it's pretty basic kind of concept, I guess, to say. It's kind of, pretty logical kind of thing. But again, it takes effort to come up with what that process is, what is that first step, and that takes some discussion and talk, and to connect that to something that's meaningful enough to actually take action is perhaps more challenging than one might initially think when thinking about it just kind of theoretically like this.
Yeah, and I can see how, again, in water-sensitive urban design, I described before how there was like what we were currently doing in stormwater management. Then there was this big dream of water-sensitive urban design. We've done a little bit of it so far. I think that challenge you talk about of like, okay, we're going to try something and get feedback and then evolve from there. I can see that playing out in this space, in that we've done these first steps, and there's been good stuff and not so good stuff come out of that, and that there's more to be done up here. But the time frame of this large scale institutional change is so long that it's actually really hard to get the perspective, get the bird's eye view, so you can actually see that we are here of this much bigger journey out to there.
Wow. Yeah.
Because even the journey from here to here has actually been between a 5 and 10 year journey. So then the rest of the journey is like, which sounds funny me describing that, because I evidently haven't been part of that journey for the whole time, right? I've wandered into this space about 6 years ago, and it was already happening.
Right.
But like I am by no means someone who came up with this vision, but I am someone who wants to see the longer term vision come to fruition.
Sure.
By all means.
Yeah. How exciting. I mean, that's what, and also just it strikes me in terms of like the amount of belief and trust and that needs to be part of this work that you're doing, when something is such a long-term sort of vision, long-term goal, it's incredible the perspective that needs to be, that long-term perspective that needs to be explored. And I can see that being perhaps a little easier when there's a group of people together working towards one thing versus an individual's perhaps own more personal life and choices. It's sometimes perhaps harder to take that sort of longer term perspective, but why not though? Hey.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Like, again, with this wider group dynamic, there's definitely a benefit in it, in the sense of, because everyone's coming at it from their different angles, that you while it's very hard for one person to get perspective, the group as a whole probably has a much greater chance. And it's probably a bit of why the coaching helps. So one person on their own struggle to get the perspective, but with the assistance of someone like yourself as a coach, so to speak, so that helps to shape that out a little bit more. So
same idea, same kind of concept for sure.
Cool. Okay, so look, I'm conscious of time here. I've really been enjoying this chat. Why don't we, to kind of wrap things up, why don't I steal a bit of a concept from Tim Ferriss, whose interviewing style I really like, which is to, I suppose, conclude with a couple of, I suppose, shorter questions. Your answers don't have to be short by any means, but just, they might seem a little bit out of context, but you never know what comes of them. So
you can ask me what I need to, what I want to see on a billboard, if I could choose something.
I'm not, the one doesn't do it for me. I really like when you think of the word successful, who's the person who comes to mind? I do like that one though.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, so are you asking me that one then?
Yeah. When you think of the word successful, who's the first person who comes to mind?
Boy, yeah. See, it's a really tough question to ask. So why don't I try to limit my answer to the the biking world, for one.
Or you
Pardon?
can, or you can tell me. Sorry, it's noisy. Or you can explain why it's so tough to answer.
Oh, cool. I like the secondary one.
Okay, let's go there.
I like I like the second question. Well, for one, if I choose someone, then it's part of it is an ego thing. Like, okay, if I choose someone and someone's listening, how might they judge me based on my answer?
Interesting. Okay.
So that's one consideration. The other is, well, there's just such a strange it's such a strange word, success. I've always kind of struggled with that word because I might answer and, well, what if that person doesn't feel successful? What if that person doesn't consider themselves success? Maybe they're kind of in the process of kind of, I don't know, going, they're just going through the motions, but to us they seem successful. So
Yeah.
it seems like, okay, well, probably I need to know this person in order, so that was kind of going through my head. Okay, do I know that this person also thinks of themselves as successful in an accurate way, not in so that's part of it as well. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's interesting. You say that, and interesting that you found answering the why is a difficult thing easier, because I've listened to Tim Ferriss ask that question to a lot of people, and every time he asks it, I think to myself, I can't answer that, but I maybe have an idea of how I would define success, but similar sort of
Okay.
thing, and that's what always runs through my head in that space. So I find that interesting.
Oh, cool.
Interestingly, there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll go with if you had to give the, I don't know, 25-year-old self a piece of advice, what would it be? And maybe some context. Where were you in your journey at 25?
Sure. So 25, yeah, man, I was charging hard on the bike. I was doing a ton of shows, a couple hundred shows a year, trial shows, traveling, most of the year away from home. So it was, really, man, it was, again, it's tough because I think the question to me makes sense in, okay, from what I learned, what might I do differently? And it's hard to answer that because how could I know that? Because I needed to be doing the things in order for me to learn.
Yep.
You need to crash on your bike in order to realize that you don't want to crash again. So how do I avoid that the next time? So what would yeah. So, man, I'm pretty lousy at these these quick fire questions.
No, but this is the interesting thing, right? Is that those two questions seem so deceptively simple, and like it is easy to answer them quite flippantly. Like the success one, you can throw it, and you can pick someone like. In Tim Ferriss's world, in the tech world, someone will say, Steve Jobs or something like that. But yeah, I'm really curious. What is it about those questions? And this is me now curious about wanting to get better as kind of an interviewer, so to speak. I wonder what it is about those questions that makes them so potent. Like there's so much depth in such basic, seemingly basic questions. I don't know I literally don't know what the answer to that is, although I would welcome some thoughts.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. That's I like that question better. Again, yeah, maybe it's just it's again. I think that my ego comes into play here. That I think that's part of it. Just okay, it's especially for naming someone I think is successful. Again, how does it rub off on me? What would I give as advice to my 25-year-old self. So, you know, for me, that's like 12 years ago. Yeah, I don't know, man.
It's all good.
Yeah, I don't know.
I sometimes, I actually really often think that the benefit of these sorts of and of discussions isn't necessarily in the answer, but the subtext to it.
Sure.
The fact that we've now ended up having this discussion about how hard those questions is probably in itself more interesting than any actual answer might have been. So that's completely fine. So
yeah. Oh, cool.
that's all good. Okay, so look, let's wrap things up there. Thank you very much for taking the time to have a chat, but also taking the time to also being open to have a chat that wasn't just, you know, straight down the line of riding and coaching and that sort of thing, and to try and let me bring in some parallels from the you know, from my world here.
Yeah.
If people want to
totally
know more about what it is that you do, want to get in touch, that sort of thing, where do people find you?
Yeah, thanks. RyanLeech.com, my website. Pretty much everything's there. So yeah, check out the site. You know, you can send me an email. There's you can find my email address there if you need to tell me something or reach out and ask me something. I'm always happy to have people reaching out for various reasons. So and lots of offerings too. You know, my bike skill courses that I've got on my site. You can send me a note about coaching. You can check out some of the online sort of group kind of style coaching work that I do on the site. So yeah, lots of stuff I'm up to, lots of projects I've got going, and so yeah, I've lots cooking, and would love for you to make contact some way.
Awesome, cool. And for clarity's sake, Ryan Leech is obviously RyanLeech.
Correct.
Always misspell your last name. So,
No.
but that's cool. Okay. Look, thanks for your time. We'll call it there, but hopefully we'll speak again soon.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Jack. Yeah.
No,
It's been really fun. So.
Okay. Cool. Speak soon.